about a bottle with a note in it, a secret note in it. And there's a story about an arrow that can shoot around corners. And then there's a story in there about magic rock. You want to hear about the magic rock?
Yeah.
The magic rock? Well, let me tell you about the magic rock. Okay? Now, there was a little boy who was a kind of mean little boy. Okay? Now, this little boy was always getting into trouble. He didn't like anybody. And hardly anybody liked him. Well, God might have liked him, and he's about the only one. Well, that little boy was out walking around one day and down the road, and he looked down, and there laying in the middle of the road was this rock. And it was kind of shiny, you know, kind of pretty. So he picked it up, and he thought, I think I'll keep this. So he got it. He started walking down the road. Well, after a little while, he came to the house of Farmer Brown. Now, he didn't really like Farmer Brown because Farmer Brown had been mean to him because he caught him picking his apples. So he standing there holding that rock, and he thought, I wonder if I could bust out Farmer Brown's window. So he took that rock and he threw it just as hard as he could. But it didn't hit the window. Instead, it went up and landed on top of the house and just sat right there on the roof of the house. And later on that night, he was asleep. He heard this strange sound. It was kind of like cracking and creaking, groaning. And then all of a sudden, a big, loud sound. Well, the next morning, when he got up and started walking into town, there was Farmer Brown's house, as flat as a pancake. Smashed right down with Farmer Brown inside, and he was just as flat as a pancake. That boy walked over, looked over there, and right in the middle of the house, that rock was there. He picked it up, looked at it. He remembered that was the rock he was throwing it on. Well, he walked a little bit further down the road, and he saw the man that taught school in the little schoolhouse, Mr. Benson. Well, Mr. Benson was always telling his mama when he skipped to school to go fishing. Well, Mr. Benson had a barn, and outside that barn he had a little wagon with a horse hooked up to it. And he thought, you know, if I took this rock and I threw it and hit that horse on the tail end, that horse would take off running. Mr. Benson would have to chase that wagon halfway across the county. So he hauled back and he threw that rock just as hard as he could. But it didn't quite make it to the horse. Instead, it landed right in the middle of the wagon. Well, he couldn't go get it. Somebody might see it. Later on that night, he heard the same noise like the earth before, creaking and groaning. It sounded like boards breaking, all kinds of stuff. Next morning, he got up, he walked down the road, and he would walk by the school teacher's house. There was the barn where that wagon had been pulled in the middle of the night. And the wagon was as flat as could be, and the barn was just blowed up into a million pieces all over the place. He walked over there, and he looked right in the middle of that wagon where it was all flattened out. What was that rock? Picked it up, he thought. I do believe that I have a magic rock. I have a feeling that if there's somebody I don't like, that this rock grows real big, smashes them down. He got to thinking, you know, old Miss Hazel that lived down the road, she told his mama one time when he stole an apple pie, and he thought, I know how I can get it. I'm going to sneak in her house, and she's not looking. I'm going to slide this rock underneath her bed. When it gets dark, that rock's going to start swelling up, growing bigger and bigger. It's going to lift her bed up, and it's going to keep going until it smashes her up against the roof. So he went to the back door. He checked it, it weren't locked. He pushed it open real quietly. He started sneaking in there. But he got just a little ways in the house, and he heard a noise behind him. He stood up, and it was that lady. And she said, "What are you doing in my house?" Well, he was standing there, put the rock in his mouth. "Well, my mama sent me to see if there was anything you needed." And the old lady, she said, "Well, I find that rather nice that your mother would send you out here for that." She said, "You're a good little boy." And she smacked him on the back. And when she did, swallowed the rock right down the middle of his mouth. And it was getting dark outside. He run out of that house, and as soon as he got out of the house, he started running home. But you know, he was running just as fast as he could, but it seemed like he was getting heavier. And his legs was getting tired. It's kind of like he was carrying a big old rock in his arm. And he looked down at his stomach, and his stomach was kind of puffed out. That rock was growing inside. He started running up a hill just as fast as he could, trying to get home, and he ran and ran. But the more he ran, the bigger his belly. And the tireder his legs got. And he went climbing and climbing. He got to the top of the hill and he just couldn't run anymore, and he just fell over, flat on his back. And he laid there, and he couldn't move. You know, later on that night, his mom was sleeping again, and she heard this loud pop. She didn't think nothing of it. But the next morning, one of the neighbors was out walking around the hills. He came up on the little strange thing. There was that little boy laying on the ground just as flat as could be, with his stomach all blowed up. And laying right in the middle of it, this one. That man picked it up, he looked at it. Kind of a nice looking rock, but I don't need it. He tossed it over his shoulder and it rolled down the hill out in the middle of the road. That's where I took it. Now, I was just the one. Do you reckon there's any of y'all that I shouldn't like? This is the rock. This is the real one. Sure is. This is magic rock.